Kazuo Ishiguro is here. He is considered one of the most important fiction writers of our time. His books include Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day, which won the Man Booker Prize in 1989. The Buried Giant is his first novel in 10 years. The New York Times has called it the weirdest, riskiest, and most ambitious thing he's published in his celebrated 33-year career. I am pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
Congratulations, because of all that people are saying about this. My question is it about appropriate for you to take 10 years to complete a novel?
Well, I would like to do it more quickly, but I'm doing the best I can.
Yes,
and there's no problem with the quantity of books out there.
Yeah,
it seems to me.
Yeah. You're going for quality.
Well, I wouldn't want to say necessarily going for quality, but I would like to. If I put something out there, whether it's good or bad, I want to slightly change the landscape. Slightly change the skyline of the pile of books out there.
Mm-hmm.
So whether people like it or not, I want to offer something a little bit different. So until that gets into place, I don't feel I'm ready to put the book out there.
Some people believe this is a radical departure for you.
Yeah, it comes as a slight surprise that people think it's so different, because I always come at these things from the inside. I never really. I'm a bit like someone's trying to build a kind of like a flying machine. Before aviation got going, all these guys used to make kind of funny flying machines in their backyards. And
yeah.
I feel like I'm a bit like that. I'm just trying to get this thing that will fly, and for a long time it doesn't fly, and I'm putting this piece onto, and finally it kind of flies.
Yeah.
But I don't really know what it looks like. It may look really weird to someone coming at it fresh.
But do you know what it is? Or does it have to be something in your mind? Is it, for example, a love story?
It's certainly a love story. I mean, I knew that it's a love story, but it's a love story of a certain kind. Because when we say love story, we usually mean a courtship story.
Yeah.
A story of two people coming together, and the story ends when they declare love to each other. This is a kind of a love story. Well, I think there should be more love stories like this one. It's about the decades, the years. It's the long distance of love. It's about all those years that you struggle to keep the flame alive.
Yeah.
And this is about a man and a woman who are determined to stand by each other right to the end. So
they suffer from a kind of amnesia.
Yeah, well, this is kind of what I had when I was talking about getting my flying machine together.
Yeah.
I mean, this was one of the main problems. I start off with a kind of a story that I can almost express in 2 or 3 lines in the abstract, and I often can't find the right way to put it off, the right setting. And one of the things I started off with is I want a situation where there's a whole community, a nation, suffering from some kind of selective memory loss. And the nation has to decide, as a nation, do they want to remember everything? Maybe there's been something very traumatic buried in the recent past, and maybe there was a very good reason for these things being buried. And
do you have a point of view on that?
My only point of view is that it's very difficult. It's very difficult to generalize, because I think there are situations. Well, let's take say France.
Yeah.
After the Second World War.
A good example.
Okay, I don't want to pick on France,
no.
But I'm being polite here. I'm in the United States. I don't want to talk about any buried giants in American society.
Sure.
I'm sure we can all come up with candidates, but I'm being as a matter of etiquette.
Yeah.
I'm here as a visitor,
so we'll talk about France.
I'm going to talk about France.
Right.
All right. So that the French after the Second World War, what are they going to do with this stuff? They seem to be on the winning side, but they spent a lot of their time collaborating with the Nazis, sending French Jews to the gas chambers without much help from the Germans, betraying each other to the Gestapo.
Exactly.
What do they do with that? How do they move on from that? Maybe there is something to be said, however outrageous, however unjust it seems, for the position that de Gaulle took, to say, let's all pretend that we were all brave resistance fighters, and let's just not visit this question for a few decades. There'll be a time perhaps when we're stronger, when we can face this, but right now, if we look at our recent past, we're just going to tear each other to pieces. We'll go communist. There might even be civil war. The society cannot hold. And if you look at situations, say like this is what was, I suppose, the starting point when I started to think about this book. If you think about situations like what happened in Bosnia in the 90s, and Kosovo, or Rwanda,
or Cambodia.
Or Cambodia, yeah. You have situations here where people seem to have lived together. Different tribes, different communities had managed to coexist, at least for a generation. And then some kind of societal memory was deliberately reawakened to mobilize hatred and violence.
Do you start with that idea, that situation, and then create characters?
Kind of, yeah. I start with that situation, but the other thing I was very concerned about, that same question about, do we want to remember certain things? Are we better off just keeping some memories buried? Right. I was wanting to apply it not just to a nation, but side by side with that, I wanted to apply it to a marriage, because I think the same questions apply to a marriage, any kind of long distance marriage, as it would, I guess, to any long term, like parent-child relationship, siblings. But that same question arises, because most relationships that go on for a long time, inevitably there are passages that you agree to just keep buried. All right, that was unfortunate. It was painful. Let's just
move on.
But the couple at the center of my novel, they have this very difficult question: would our love survive remembering some of these things? Do we want to remember some of the things that we have buried? But on the other hand, if we don't look at these things, and they sense that their time together is limited now because they're a certain age, if we don't look at these darker passages that we've just put to one side for now, is our love genuine? I mean, is it based on something phony? And I think those same questions, they're very similar to the questions a larger
so
family
individuals
might ask.
have what states have.
I think so, yeah.
A sense of having to...
That question, when is it better to remember? When is it better to forget? Is a very difficult one that applies to nations and to families and to marriages.
You know what's crazy about this is the scientific aspect of this, and I'm not knowledgeable about it, but I think there are some experimentations going in trying to understand the brain, so that there are things and drugs that can affect what you remember, that can tamper with memory.
Well, you see, that kind of thing might have been very useful for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, at the stage, I came to a stage, right? Because this is what happens to me as a novelist. I mean, it's not. I don't write novels in a sensible order.
Right.
Yeah. I start off with a story without a setting. Right.
Yes.
Now, if you'd said that to me at a certain point in my kind of attempt to compose this novel, I might have said, "Oh, that's good." I might maybe that's what I need. I'll go with that as a kind of a sci-fi-ish modern kind of device. That would give me what I want, because I need a situation where everyone has to make that decision. Do we want to turn back, the force that allows us to forget, or actually is it terribly useful? Do we depend on forgetfulness to carry on? And so that's a very good. What you just said there is very interesting. I mean, I didn't in the end decide to go down that kind of path. I decided to go back into some kind of mythical past where I thought I could rely on very ancient kind of storytelling devices, so I could have a kind of a supernatural mist.
It's worth looking up. I mean, you'll find out. I mean, a number of things as we explore the brain. As everybody does, and the academy and science and everybody else, we're finding out interesting things, and that's one aspect of it, of which there are many. But memory has been a theme of yours, has it not?
Yeah, I sometimes worry that it's become a bit of an obsession.
Yes,
I mean, my entire seems to be obsessed with memory. Yes. But I think it's probably changed and evolved over the years. Because when I started to write fiction as a very young man, I think it was in order to remember. Yeah, I think that's why there's a very intimate link in my mind and in my heart, between writing fiction and remembering, because
Now, how does writing fiction catalyze or stimulate memory?
Well, it's not so much to stimulate memory. I had left Japan at the age of 5 to live in Britain, and I think all the way through my growing up, I had these memories of this place that was very precious to me, and it was the place I thought I was going to return to at some point. I had these memories, and it wasn't like a specific series of memories. It was like a memory of a whole world, a whole kind of way of being, a whole life, and a whole atmosphere, and a whole group of people. And as I got older, I realized that very personal Japan that was inside my head was somewhere I couldn't go to in a plane. And it was also fading with every year that I got older. And so I think I started off my whole writing fiction career by actually wanting to preserve these memories. And, I couldn't preserve them just by writing down facts. I had to actually rebuild the Japan of my imagination and memory in a book. So I think right at the foundation of my writing impulse was this notion that creating a world in fiction was an act of memory, so memory preservation. So I could say, actually now, it's safe inside that book. I
have to call on my memory to inform my book. Am I right about that? Your memory is going to have to influence the setting and character development.
I didn't really even have to call on my memory. It's almost like I've got this world that I have built in my head naturally, not because I'm trying to write a novel, but naturally as a kid growing up, this world builds up in my head. It's a mixture of imagination, speculation, and memory. And then as I get to a certain age, what am I going to do with it? Do I let it just disappear as the time goes on? If it's a very special place and only I have access to it, I want to actually get it down in some kind of way. And I think that was the original impulse. I want to preserve it inside a fictional world. And so that's how it started. And then I think as I kind of carried on writing, I never lost that fundamental idea that writing is something about memory. And I started to look at other people or other characters in some depth, but I always tended to tell my stories through memory. People remembering about themselves, people putting a memory from 30 years back right next to a memory from 5 or 10 minutes ago, or 2 days ago, and trying to assess these memories. Are the memories accurate? Are they're blurred at the edges? Are they being distorted by the person remembering the thing? I mean, it's a way of constructing a sense of oneself.
And what was the impact of that 14th century poem called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight?
Not a huge amount, okay? I mean, most of that poem, maybe many people watching now know it. It's a very entertaining story. It's a story poem.
Right.
Most of it isn't particularly relevant to my novel, but although I recommend people read it because it's a very entertaining poem. But there was just one little stanza. The story takes place in 2 castles, right. But there's a little, literally like something like a bridge passage where the young Sir Gawain rides from one castle to the other castle, and you get a little glimpse of what Britain was like back in those days. And the anonymous poet says, it was a hell of a place. This young man, there were no inns or anything in those days, so he had to kind of sleep on rocks in the pouring rain. I don't know why he had to sleep on rocks. He should sleep under a tree or something, but he slept on rocks. And then,
you don't know why?
Well, but it said what really struck me was that it says in the next couple of lines, it says something like, and I'm paraphrasing, it says, he was chased by wild boar, by wolves, and panting ogres would chase him up hills out of villages. And then the story just continues. He goes to another castle and it continues in some splendor, But this little glimpse of this weird, imaginary, ancient Britain, just those few lines sparked off a whole world for me. And I thought, that would be a fun place to put down my novel. I could suddenly see this very inhospitable place.
Yeah, that's a pretty good place. When you find that, that's a huge benefit. Isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And that this happens. I go location hunting for, because as I told you, I go about things backwards. It's a stupid way to write novels,
right.
But I get a story and I don't have a location, I don't have a setting, and sometimes you ask why 10 years. So sometimes it takes a long time to find the right setting.
Yeah.
But sometimes.
How long did it take you to find the setting in this case?
Well, it took a long time. So I did actually think about sci-fi settings, the galaxy far away, and all this kind of thing.
Right.
But that's what happens. Sometimes you come across something, and just a few lines sparks off a whole world like that. And I particularly liked the banality of the panting ogres. Like they,
the
there's
banality.
There was no surprise. The poem doesn't say, and you know what, there were ogres. It's nothing. No. It's just and it's a nuisance. These ogres, made life very inconvenient, as though they were like not very friendly bulls that you encounter when you're walking across a farm field. I mean, that's the way it's treated. So I thought, well, I'll have that. In my world, there will just be ordinary things in the background.
It is said that your wife, when she first read the book, hated it. Is that fair?
This is what you're getting at when you wanted to know why it took 10 years. I see. I'm giving these very serious literary responses. You want the simple human answer. No, you're right. No, she didn't hate it. She didn't hate it. Now, for encouragement, I'd done a lot of work. I'd found the setting. I'd worked everything out. So I'm quite a long way into it by the time I write the prose. I'd written about 60 or 70 pages, and I thought. Sometimes, although I usually work alone, I need a little bit of encouragement, like everybody else. So I thought my wife Lorna would give it to me.
Yes.
So I showed it to her, and she said, you're going to have to just start again from scratch. And
how was that moment between the two of you?
Well, it was a little bit awkward, but I
have to start over from the scratch.
Yeah. I mean, what she's saying is that she was saying that she's saying I'm not saying you have to alter this character or change a little bit. Not a word of this can survive. But she did say you don't have to abandon this idea. She said the concepts, the ideas are very interesting.
But you have to start over.
Yeah. Not a word. I mean, the execution is all wrong. You're going to have to start from scratch, and so. But I don't mind this too much, because
Did you take it seriously?
Yeah, I did take it seriously. I put it to one side. I wrote another book. I wrote a book of linked short stories called Nocturnes. I had a couple of movies to worry about.
Right.
I wrote some song lyrics for the jazz singer Stacey Kent. I did these other things, but I always knew I'd come back to this. This happens to me a lot. Never Let Me Go, I had to attempt 3 times. There are 2 abandoned versions of that book back in the 90s. And so now I've got to a stage where...
But they build on each other, don't they? I mean,
they build on each other.
You didn't just abandon it. You didn't throw it in the ocean.
No, I never actually abandoned. I never abandoned anything, actually. And because I had this kind of strange, maybe a naive confidence that, if I come back to it, something that was wrong before would have gone away. And there will be a solution that hadn't occurred to me first time round, second time round, that will present itself. And that's been my experience. Never Let Me Go, it was only the 3rd time round that I came upon the what you might call the sci-fi conceit, that this should be a story about young people who had actually been harvested as clones for organ donation. That wasn't there in my first 2 attempts. I was trying very hard to contrive some way in which young people could go through the experience of old people. That they could go through the struggles of the whole thing of becoming middle-aged and then old and then getting sick and dying and asking all the questions that people do over a larger lifespan. I wanted to find some way in which they could do this in 28, 30 years, and I just couldn't do it before. But then this piece of the jigsaw presented itself.
If you could have been a great musician, would you prefer that to a great novelist?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. Because I still love music, and of course, when you're not allowed to do something, because I wanted to be not really a musician. I wanted to be a great songwriter.
Yes.
Yeah, I love songs. Not a composer. That's too grand. I love like the 3-minute, 4-minute, 2-minute song. A beautiful emotion or world contained just in a song with all these dimensions: lyrics, performance, the music, the orchestration. I think a song is a wonderful thing. If I could have been a songwriter, I might swap it. But I mean, a novelist isn't a bad thing. It takes 10 years to write a novel rather than
Why
2
does
days
it
to
have
write
to be either or? Because they're both so demanding.
It doesn't have to be either or in theory, but in practice, I'm not a very good songwriter. I think
if you're a great writer, you know whether you're a good songwriter or not.
I think I'm not a bad lyricist, but I work with Jim Tomlinson, Stacey Kent's band leader and saxophonist and husband.
Yes.
He writes all the music. I mean, I guess also as I got older, when I was in my mid-20s, when I moved from songs to short fiction to novels, I started to feel that there were certain things I wanted to do that I couldn't do in song. But nevertheless, I think many of the things that mark me as a novelist today, my style, my priorities, they derive directly from my decisions that I made about songwriting. I think in somewhere in the back of my head, I'm still writing a song. This is why I like first-person narratives so much. That they're somewhere. I think a novel like Never Let Me Go or Remains of the Day, they're like songs. It's just one songs, not like big band songs. They're like something like a guy with an acoustic guitar, or a woman with an acoustic guitar singing to about 17 people in a New York coffee house. That's in your mind. Yeah, that's kind of in my mind. I want that kind of intimate thing, kind of almost like a confessional thing. Somebody is telling the story of their life to a small audience in an intimate setting. That's why I love a certain kind of first-person narrative.
Can you play an acoustic guitar?
I'm not a bad guitarist. Yeah, I can play many styles. Jazz, folk. I can play in weird tunings, blues. I can play bad piano, but as I say, I'm not interested in being. Well, I wouldn't mind being Eric Clapton or B.B. King, but it's not that kind of guitar. For me, a guitar is something that helps pin down a song. It's a good instrument for songs because it holds down rhythm, harmony, and melody at the same time. It's a great accompanying instrument for a song.
What's interesting about the conversation and the guitar and lyrics and songwriting and music is I have a friend who is a brilliant writer. He has a son, and his son has been almost a prodigy at a series of things, and really good at chess, games, and things like that. He now is in college and has become obsessed, which happened right before he went to college, with the guitar. And I thought, well, gee, that's a strange thing, to be obsessed with the guitar, having done and been excelled in so many things.
Mm-hmm.
And you helped me understand it. It's the complexity of it all that gives you a great challenge.
Yeah, well, I don't know what kind of guitar he's interested in, but there's something about the guitar.
Okay, go ahead.
There's something about a guitar that it just implies. It implies all the other stuff. It implies a whole orchestra.
Yes.
It's a very good instrument for that. There's something about a piano that it's almost like a substitute for an orchestra, whereas a guitar, just 6 strings, it has to just simply imply. It's like a little tiny brushwork. One of those Japanese brushwork things. A few little lines that it implies a whole world, or like a haiku. And so I think that maybe your friend's son, maybe that's what he finds fascinating. You just arrange a few little chords, a few harmonies in this kind of way, and suddenly it implies a whole kind of orchestration.
It's great to have you here.
It's lovely to be back.
As always. The Buried Giant is the title of the novel, Kazuo Ishiguro. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.